Well, welcome to Focus today. Steve Johnson here with you with Dinesh D'Souza, and it's great to be able to talk to him again. You know, we've had him on the air. Whenever he has a movie, we interview him. So that's how he knows he can get on the air on theDove. He just has to do the small task of putting out another movie, and there you go. Dinesh, it's good to see you.
Hey, it's nice to be on the show. Good to be back.
Yeah, great. Well, you know, to do kind of a little recap, we first had you on for 2016 Obama's America. That was that back in, when did that release? That was just before the election, right?
Well, that came out before the 2012 election, and that was my first movie. And as you might know, it annoyed Obama because he was railing against it on his website, barackobama.com. And then shortly after, the FBI came banging on my door. So it's sometimes risky to make a movie.
The whole story right there. In fact, you kind of talk about that in this latest movie. But between that one and the latest one, you had America, Imagine the World Without Her. Came out in 2014. And now Hillary's America, The Secret History of the Democratic Party, which, when I saw it, I thought this is a departure from the style that you have used of the other two. And I think it surprised some people, but I do want to get into that, realizing that some people may not have seen it. I want to run the trailer that we have of that, just to make sure for those who haven't seen it, they can kind of get an idea. I looked at Box Office Mojo, and it looks like, from what I can tell, I don't know how pleased you are, but it looks like it's doing quite well. You've been able to raise $11,270,000 as of this morning, and you're in 1,217 theaters. This is good news, is it not?
Yeah, the movie is, I mean, for a documentary, it's doing fantastic. It's the #1 documentary of the year. It's #8 in political documentaries of all time, and it's been out, this is only its third week. So the movie is, it's making Michael Moore look bad. Let's put it this way. He's been the king of this genre. And by the way, in the top 10 movies of all time, he has 5. But he's made 20 movies. I have 3, and I've made 3 movies.
All right. For those who haven't seen it, I want to run the trailer right now so you kind of get an idea of what this movie is about concerning Hillary's America.
The Democrats are the party of economic opportunity, social justice, and racial equality. That's their pitch. But is it true? Who are these Democrats?
It really goes back to this idea of social engineering and social control. In America, we called it progressivism. Soviet Union, they called it communism.
The whole purpose of the Democratic Party was to reestablish white supremacy.
The Democrats support slavery, while we Republicans oppose slavery.
To the Democratic Party.
This Civil Rights Act will allow colored men to sit at the same table beside the white guests.
The racism continued well into the 20th century.
We gotta give them a little something, but not enough to make a difference.
Sometimes the violence intensified, other times the racism merely changed forms. Almost everything they did had a racist motive.
While Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, the Clintons took hundreds of millions of dollars from foreign entities.
She looked very menacing. I was really frightened.
I didn't see any reason to keep them. The fact is, we had 4 dead Americans. What difference at this point does it make?
Imagine how much worse things could get if these 2 depraved crooks returned to the White House.
Dinesh D'Souza's and Hillary's America, the name of it. That's hard to say. Dinesh D'Souza's Hillary's America. That's probably not how you wanted to have your name mentioned, but there it is. And you're pulling no punches with this one. This is far more direct, I think, than the other 2 you've done. Am I right?
Yeah, the Obama movie was just about Obama, and that was because Obama was an outsider. People didn't know a lot about him. And he's maintained a kind of distant relationship even with his own party over the past 8 years. Hillary is the head of a gang, the progressive gang or the Democratic gang. And this movie tells the story of that gang, how they got started. And in a way, I think it's a very powerful movie because it strips away the moral capital of the Democratic Party. The Democrats say we're the party of the ordinary guy, of the little guy. We've always been there fighting for women and immigrants and minorities and blacks. But the truth is that that is a big lie. The Democrats actually have been the party of exploitation, subjugation, theft, and murder. They're the ones who threw the American Indians off their land. They upheld slavery. They promoted segregation and Jim Crow. They're the ones who founded the Ku Klux Klan and used it as the domestic terrorist arm of the Democratic Party for 30 years. They fought women's suffrage both in Congress and in the states. They're the ones who have blocked immigrants from coming to this country. They were in bed with fascism in the 1930s. I mean, I'm just getting started. The Democrats are the perpetrators of many of the worst acts of American history, and they have never acknowledged this, and they've never apologized for it.
Now, I noticed about, I'd say, the first 3/4 of the movie, you take the time to show that historical background through a lot of role-playing and actual words that people have been saying over the years from the Democratic Party to kind of make that point. Was your idea to say, look, if we can show who the Democrats really are from the base and who they are now, and I think you purported they're continuing that same agenda to some degree, that this will change how people may vote this November? Was that part of your idea of that particular strategy to do this?
Well, it was aimed at telling a truth that has been camouflaged because the Democrats are so dominant in academia, Hollywood, and the media. They're able to put out a propaganda narrative. For example, they make it sound like Trump is the real racist and fascist. So if Trump crosses his arms and looks to his left, that makes him Mussolini. If he calls some guy a Mexican, that makes him, the inheritor of the mantle of bigotry. Now, in reality, the party of bigotry, the Democrats, these are the people who actually enslave people, brutalize them, lock them up, lynch them, burn them. This is what actually the ideology of racism and white supremacy actually meant. Fascism actually meant supporting Hitler. It meant showing sympathy for Italian fascism and Mussolini. Now, the guy who did that wasn't Trump. FDR was enamored by Mussolini in the 1930s. He sent members of his brain trust to study Italian fascism to bring those ideas over here. This is the actual history of the United States. So to me, it's important to tell a true story because what's happening now is a product of what's happened in the past. When we read leaked Democratic Party emails and we see that they're talking insultingly about blacks, about Hispanics, calling them the Taco Bell crowd, we don't understand what that means unless we realize that these are the same bigots. The only difference is that they used to talk that way openly, and now they talk that way in private.
Since this movie's been out now for several weeks, almost not quite a month, what's been the reaction so far? Have you heard positive and negative both?
Yeah, I've heard both. The critics, who mainly on the left, have been railing against the movie. Very interestingly, they haven't been able to find a single fact that is wrong with it. But they're very upset about it, and they should be, because the movie sort of challenges and discombobulates their whole worldview. There's a site online called Rotten Tomatoes. Interestingly, among the critics, we have a rating of 4%, unbelievably low, but among the audience, 85%. I've never seen such a big spread between the left-wing critics on the one hand and the people who actually go to the theater and buy tickets on the other.
When I went to the theater, I got there kind of early, and I thought, well, it'll be interesting to see who's going to show up. And this was the first showing of the first night. And, realizing the budget that you have, which is probably not what Paramount would put forth or Warner Brothers with one of their blockbuster movies, the word seemed to have gotten out because there were quite a few people at the theater. And we took our camera, and after the movie was over, I was able to grab some of those people who were leaving the theater, and I asked them what they thought of this movie.
I've read many books before this, and this movie just confirms everything I've read. Our government's in trouble. We need to replace them all, I think.
I'm totally frustrated with listening to all the stuff here on the radio and TV about, what one is saying about the other, when actual people aren't looking at what's happening to America and how people are suffering because of these decisions that Hillary and Mr. Obama is making.
I think everybody in America should see that movie. It brings out facts that aren't public that aren't people don't know about, and it's just an enlightening, eye-opening movie.
Well, those are just a few of them that I was able to randomly ask what they thought of it, and I think it's probably in line with what you had hoped would be the goal of the movie.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think if you approach people on the street or approach blacks in particular, you say, which is the party of bigotry? Which is the party that actually promoted slavery and segregation and lynching? They'll probably say, well, that's probably the Republican Party. But it's not true. The Republican Party actually is the party of emancipation. The Republican Party fought segregation. It passed legislation to block the Klan. So this is all important because this is where the Democrats draw their ethical capital. They basically say, we have the right to rule because we have always been on the right side of history. No, in fact, the Democrats have always been on the wrong side of history, and they're on the wrong side of history now.
You know, and I find that interesting because when you bring that up, it reminds me how many notes that I've seen, comments on different web pages about how people are saying, well, the Republicans are just the Nazi party. And I thought, and I've written sometimes responses saying, no, you've got this wrong. If you look at what happened there with so many of the issues of the day, it wasn't the conservatives, it was the liberal tinge that wanted to change the policies in that country during that era. And it's what I end up hearing is a resounding thud of silence after that, because I think once people look at it, they realize they've kind of got their history wrong. But it's so easy to say, oh, you're intolerant, you're Nazis, you're thugs, you're dictators, and it's like, I think you got that a little bit wrong there.
Well, this is the genius, though, of the progressives. They've been able somehow to imply by innuendo that fascism was kind of a right-wing thing, and that's how they can use it to tar Trump. The truth of it is fascism was always on the left. That's why the Nazis called themselves National Socialists. They knew it, and the leftists in America knew it. The progressives in America knew it. Young JFK went to Nazi Germany in the 1930s, and he came back effusive with praise of Hitler. He goes, Hitler is a legend. The people who don't like Hitler are probably jealous of him, and if Hitler says that the Nordic people are superior, that's probably because they are. Now, after World War II, the progressives looked at all this, the sympathy of JFK and also FDR, and they were like, uh-oh, this is going to make us look really bad. We don't want young people to know about this. Let's prudently leave it out of the textbook. So there it is in the historical record. I put it in my book, Hillary's America. The evidence is indisputable, and this is why the left is so, in a way, thrashing around to try to find fault with this movie and book, but they haven't yet been able to do that.
Okay, we're talking with Dinesh D'Souza. Of course, he's the film producer of Hillary's America. We're going to continue talking to him, not just about the film, but where we are in this getting up close now towards the November election and what he sees happening on the political landscape that way. So join us, and we'll be back in just a couple minutes here on Focus Today.
I'm Paulina Leiser, producer of Focus Today. Thank you for watching this video, and make sure to check our other videos at theDove.us.
Welcome back to Focus Today. Our guest is Dinesh D'Souza. He's a filmmaker who's made his latest movie, Hillary's America. It's been out for about 3 weeks and having quite a response to it and doing quite well at the box office theaters. And we've shown you a little bit of the trailer of that. We're going to talk a little bit more about this election as it comes up, but wanted to give more reaction to some of the people who had seen the film that we talked to after the premiere showing in Oregon.
I thought that it was really informative. There was a lot there that I had already known, but it just gave us more of the history and the truth behind, what's happened in the past, especially the history of how the Civil War was more about Democrats against Republicans. And
was that kind of a new idea for you, or did you know that?
No, I knew the whole story of the North and the South and the fight against slavery, but I didn't realize that it was a Democrat-Republican struggle.
Dinesh D'Souza brings out facts that aren't publicly known, and he has the documentation to back it up. Everybody in America should see this movie. It's truly an eye-opening film.
It's amazing, and it really shows the corruption, and it makes everybody really stop and think before they vote and who to vote for.
Well, there you go, Dinesh. A few of the people who saw the film, and it was there were quite a few there on that initial showing, the one that I visited to, and it's clearly doing quite well at the theaters now in over 1,200 throughout the United States. You know, some of the things that you showed there that you wanted to bring out to the public to let them know really the history of, in this case, the Democratic Party and how some of those agenda items are forwarded today. Some people, as you heard, said, I kind of knew some of this stuff, but it kind of brought it together. Do you think you're going to convert some people who might be Hillary voters to vote in a different way because of this?
I think that people who saw this movie would recognize that the Clintons are in a corrupt league of their own. They're different in this way than even Obama. Obama, at the end of the day, is an ideologue. I think I called him right in my movie about him 4 years ago. His ideology is pathetic, it's destructive, but poor man, he believes it. He thinks he's doing good for America and for the world. With Hillary and Bill, you're dealing more here with Bonnie and Clyde. These are people who are out for themselves. They've been running rackets since the Arkansas days. Now, in those days, they'd make 50 cents here, $100 there. But as they got bigger, their rackets got bigger. In the White House, they were renting out the Lincoln bedroom for cash. They were, stealing pictures and curios off the desks and the walls. They were selling pardons to big-time racketeers, tax chiefs, and felons. And then when Hillary was Secretary of State, more of the same, renting out American foreign policy to Canadian billionaires looking for mineral rights, or Russian oligarchs looking for access to American uranium. So I think that with the Clintons, you're dealing basically with a rip-off operation. And, you know, we've had crooks in America before, but we didn't know they were crooks in advance. We found out and we threw them out. With the Clintons, we know.
As far as the Christians, people of faith who are watching this, I find that some people are really engaged, others are not really, and in fact, the whole thing of politics, they just don't like the controversy and everything. What would you say to people who are Christians? What do they need to consider as we're heading to the November election?
Well, our politics have become, they have, in a way, there's been a coarsening of the tone. When I came of age, for example, I admired people like William F. Buckley, Irving Kristol, Milton Friedman, Solzhenitsyn. You don't see those people on the horizon now, people of that caliber. So I understand why people feel a little turned off. On the other hand, look, this is a ritual we do every 4 years. It's very important for us as Christians, if we're going to be salt and light, to pay attention to what's going on, focus, cast an informed vote, and then move on with your life. Ultimately, if we have bad leaders, we're going to have a bad society. So we don't want the cause of this bad society to be the abstinence or negligence of the Christian community.
You know, last week was, I think even Donald Trump would say, wasn't one of his better weeks. Polls showed at least one of them, and I realize the polls are all over the place, but it did show that Hillary had gained a few percentage points. She was 10 points in one poll higher than he was. Now one poll says that it's closed in even closer. We have so many unusual dynamics going on now between these two candidates. I think a lot of us look at this saying we've never seen this kind of a presidential election before. What do you think it is that Donald Trump needs to do? What does he need to focus on? I mean, you've looked at this a lot with a historical perspective. What does he need to do to get people to say, okay, we cannot have Hillary in office, so people have to vote for me?
I'll tell you quite honestly what I think his magic bullet is, because he's got to realize he's up against it. When the left dominates academia, the media, and Hollywood, they've got huge megaphones on the Hillary side, and Trump can do nothing about that. That simply is the fact of life of this election. Now, this is a movie that we've made that can have a powerful impact on independents, on Latinos, on blacks. The movie will come out in DVD in October, 1 month before the election. Now, I don't have the power to do this, but Trump does, and the RNC does, and the super PACs do, namely to take DVDs of this movie and drop them into the mailboxes of swing voters, whose names and addresses are known. This is about 2 to 3 million people in 9 swing states across the country. I believe if Trump does that alone, it will win the election for him.
Have you kind of floated that concept to both the RNC and the Trump campaign?
Well, you know, this is the mysterious thing. I have sent DVDs of the movie to Trump, so I believe that if he hasn't seen it yet, he will watch it soon. He did tweet out, "Go see the movie." I haven't heard a whisper from the RNC. That's very strange to me. If I was Michael Moore, the whole Democratic Party would be behind me. So I hope that the RNC watches this film. I think they'll see the potential of this film to powerfully sway hearts and minds. It's much more effective than the usual type of rubbishy political commercials that both sides put out.
Well, let me ask you, if the Republican National Convention doesn't do what you're asking, do you think this is further evidence that they're just not in touch with what could be their core constituency?
Yes, I mean, people already think that they're out of it, and this would actually show that they're completely out of it, because this is a movie that fires people up. I mean, I've put more than 1 million people in the theater already to see this movie, and typically when the film ends, I don't know if this was the experience when you saw, the whole theater stands up and begins to applaud. Now, how often have you been to the theater where that happens? It's very, very rare, and yet it's happening in theaters across the country.
Interesting. I guess the timing of this was so that you could do exactly what that strategy is right there. It'll be interesting to see if, in fact, some people who may have been voting towards Hillary would change their vote. I don't know. You know, at the same time that I see people who are polarized, some definitely for Trump, some definitely for Hillary, I still hear interviews of people who say, I haven't decided yet. And I'm really wondering where these people have been, to be quite frank, or what haven't they considered, because these are two such different candidates that you would have thought a decision would have been made, but it might just be that they're waiting to hear something from either one of them, whatever that is, that will sway them, do you think?
I think it's also that the Republicans decided to go with the outsider and the Democrats with the insider. So in a way, it's a hard thing to choose. Trump has a lot of unknowns around him. The Trump door has a lot of question marks on it. And even I feel that uncertainty or anxiety about Trump. But to me, the Hillary door has the sign, a known crook. And so for me, it's not a tough choice between the two of them. But I can understand why some people feel, well, gee, is this our choice? Why can't we have a third person? But I ultimately think at the end of the day, we have to realize that this notion of a third person is illusory. For this election and this time in our history, this is our choice.
Yeah. Dinesh D'Souza, hey, thanks for taking some time out. I think this is important to kind of discuss some of the stuff behind the scenes and what you'll be doing. So we'll be looking for that DVD that'll be coming out in October. Is that right?
In the meantime, if you let me say, Hillary's America, themovie.com, you can watch a trailer. You can also put in your zip code. It'll tell you where the movie's playing near you, and look for my book of the same title, which is in Costco and bookstores everywhere.
D'Souza, filmmaker and the producer of Hillary's America, Secret of the Democratic Party. Thanks for being with us.
My pleasure.
All right, stay tuned, because coming up in just a few minutes, Todd Friel with Wretched TV. We're going to continue our discussion about evangelicals as they are going to the polls. Do we really have a voting bloc as we did maybe in the 80s? Probably not. We're going to get his perspective on some of these things coming up in just over 2 minutes here on The Dove.